This is amazing. So it seems that publishing is a big topic for you guys, right? A lot of people are even queuing up and standing in the back. We haven't had that the whole 2 days long. Good. Looks as if these guys backstage have something to say. Good. What are we talking about? We are talking about the future debate, next generation publishers. And we've got, as you can see, some great people here. And what's going to be the content? As you know, publishers are losing kind of their content dominance in the world. There's content aggregators coming up, content marketing machines, content marketing platforms. Brand websites are turning into content marketing hubs. It's all about content marketing and how can I share content the easiest way and best way. And the question is, how can publishers win back in some way, but also, what's the relevance of all these players coming into the market? Now, let me get all the speakers up on stage for you. So we have got from Newscred, Mark Addis. Come on. And you can clap your hands if you may. Come on. So then we've got from Sharethrough, Dan Greenberg.
You gotta do a whole runway walk here.
Good up here. From Buzzfeed, we've got down Nguyen. Good to have here. And from Gruner and Jahr, we've got Sugarman. And finally, we've got a moderator. Stan, good to see you. Finally, we've got a moderator. He's the CXO from MediaLink, Gittlin, who's going to moderate the panel. Good. Don't stumble and fall. Yeah, have fun, guys.
You almost took a spill, Grant.
I almost lost it.
Took a spill.
So thanks for joining us today. Thanks to the audience for joining as well. Can we queue up the initial audience voting question? Perfect. So everyone in the audience, feel free to cast your vote on this salient topic. So one of the things I thought was interesting is that dmexco chose to go with a question that really focuses on the consumer. Where do each of you go to consume your news? And so I'll turn it over to our panelists today to ask what core insight regarding how content is consumed today drives your company? Maybe we'll kick it off with Dow, since you're pretty well known for...
Sure, absolutely. I think there are a few things. The first thing that is important to BuzzFeed is that we want to distribute our content where people are reading it and watching it. And so we are agnostic as to where you're reading BuzzFeed content. It could be on our site, in our app, on Facebook, in Snapchat, on Pinterest, any number of places. And for us, that is important because we really can reach a much larger audience by going to where the audiences are. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that we really value learning from what people are doing with our content, whether they're obviously reading it, if they're sharing it, why they're sharing it, how they're sharing it, and how that is spreading. And so that with this kind of learnings, we can go back and make even better content. The third thing that drives our business is that we have a business model that fully aligns with our editorial and distribution strategy. And that is incredibly important to us. For those who don't know, we have a fully native advertising model where all of our advertising is native to each platform. And then finally, the last thing, which is important to me because I run the technology group at BuzzFeed, is that in order to fully achieve the kinds of things that we want to do, we need to have a technology stack that can distribute, track, and interconnect all the different kinds of data and learnings that we can from all the different platforms.
And with that, I'd love to ask Dan a little bit more about this, as you built you've been a pioneer in distributing content and how technology enables that. Could you talk a little bit about how those consumer insights and the need for distribution drove your business?
Yeah, I like the question. So I'll take it all the way back to when we started the company, which might be a little bit farther back than you're asking for. I'll take it all the way back. I started the company out of a Stanford research lab. It was kind of like a persuasive technology research lab. And so we did a ton of research into how do you change behavior using computers, not humans. So how do you make someone quit smoking cigarettes using persuasive text messages? How do you get somebody to go to school more often with the suggestion of social proof that your friends are going to school? I think the biggest insight out of that lab before we started the company was that there was this notion that they called kairos, which is this concept that it's the right suggestion, but in the right format. We always say like the right ad at the right time to the right user. We say that in general ad tech language. The notion of Kairos, though, I think really talks about the format being an incredibly important concept. What Dow was talking about when it comes to native, obviously, is the format that fits in naturally as well as sort of the function that matches. And so I think the early insight, seed, whatever you want to call it, inspiration for the company was we said, let's build ad technology, build the software for the publishers who want to have ads that do truly fit in naturally, where the idea is that all advertising clearly is about persuasion and changing behavior and changing perception. And if you can change somebody's perception and behavior and persuade them to change their point of view with an ad from the corner that lives as a foreign object to the page, like all the more power to you. But a much more sort of strategic and easy way to get a concept from your company and brand into somebody's brain is having a message that fits naturally into what they're already doing. And so the early seed of the company was essentially that insight that ads should fit in, and they should fit in naturally, and publishers should manage those ads in a way that's as sophisticated and as advanced as their traditional pre-roll and banners and boxes, et cetera, but in a way that's much more respectful to the user experience.
I love that. And so I'll turn over to you, Stan, someone who originally had boxes and squares and has had to evolve.
And we still do.
And still do, but have had to
There's
evolve.
no shame.
No shame in boxes and
no,
squares
not at
here.
all.
No
Not at
judgment
all.
on this
There's a little
panel.
shame.
So the same question. So if we're talking about being device agnostic then as a publisher, well then we're even more device agnostic because we're not just on social and on desktop and on mobile, we're on printed paper and on other things. So I think from the DNA of the publisher, they have to actually distribute their content and what insights they get. Well, the great thing about digital is you get these real-time insights. And then to combine those, what other sources of insights can you get to distribute your content then beyond what the devices we have? And we love stuff like him because that's just kind of also the DNA. If you have readers and users, hey, yeah, we're going to get them with boxes and banners. And I think that has one great component. I don't think that marketing can live without that. But native ads that are much more accepted is the secret sauce that we definitely need to change perception and buying.
I love that. That's actually a perfect segue into Mark, who does so much work with brand and content marketing. And how do you help advise brands on thinking about their publishing DNA and the insights that they need to better utilize Newscred?
Well, I mean, primarily we're a software platform rather than a sort of consulting advisory function. But what we do give brands the ability to understand is who the people are that are actually engaging with their content. So it's a big part of our platform, which is essentially a content marketing platform, if anyone doesn't know, that it simplifies the process of publishing content. But the key thing is understanding not just that you've got 1 million page views on your content, but who are the people that are actually behind those sort of interactions with your content, both in social and on your own property. And so it's more, what we're doing is giving that kind of insight rather than ahead of time sort of telling them what they should publish. We're actually saying, hey, we know what you should publish because this is what your audience wants to read. So that's the angle we take it.
That's great. So there previously was this debate of, let's call it content versus distribution. And I think it was Buzzfeed had the previous president had the famous quote, "Content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the pants." Rob Norman added a piece to this where he said tone. Tone is really critical, and tone is one of the hardest things to scale. So in your minds, and I'll make it a jump ball, which reigns supreme, content, distribution, or context?
I can start. I mean, I think that media is complicated. Media consumption is complicated. In the same way that I don't believe that there's one metric to rule them all. I don't believe that there's one facet of publication and publishing that rules them all. I think that's simplistic and unnecessarily so. For us, when we think about how do we know that something is successful? What makes content successful? Obviously, there's the popularity metric, right? You can see how many people viewed it and that kind of thing. And that we're pretty good at measuring, and we measure it in real time in lots of different ways. But we've been evolving as the landscape has evolved. We've evolved and so we think now about success in different ways. So the first way is, does this piece of content spread in different locations internationally? So sometimes when we see a piece of content that goes really viral in the US, gets translated into different languages, or is covered in different countries in a different way, and is it successful there? Or something that something happens in Brazil. We have a big Brazil operation, and we see some piece of content going viral there, and then we won't necessarily translate it, but we'll report on it in English, and it ends up going viral in English. And so when something goes, a piece of content that is, or an idea is viral in multiple languages, we think that's important, and that's something that we can learn from. The second way is, does this piece of content or idea spread or is successful on different platforms? And so is this kind of like approach to this topic, maybe if it's very successful on Instagram, let's say it overperforms on an Instagram account, and then we can take it and adapt it to our become a Vine or into one of our Snapchat editions, and is it successful there? If the post is successful, can we translate it into a video, and do they both overperform? And so if it's successful on different platforms, then that's also something that we think is interesting and something that we can learn from. And the third way is, does it make a real impact on people's lives? Kind of like what you were saying earlier. If we have a food post, like a recipe, are people making that, recipe and then like uploading it to Instagram or Facebook and say, hey, I made this and I ate it and thought it was great, right? Like that's a way of impacting someone's life. In the same way that we have investigations in news where, as a result of investigations, people are arrested or fired or laws are changed, then that has like real impact on people's lives. And so when we think about, like you're saying, like context, distribution, and content, I think that they're all important, but I think that when you think about what is success for a piece of content, I think that definition, that sort of criteria can change and can be different for different kinds of content. And because we create so many different things on different platforms and about different subjects, we have a sort of broader and more global approach to how we think about content and how we learn from what we do.
And that's as a publisher who has a very strong voice. I do think it's interesting when you look at the software platforms and you're balancing thousands of different contexts with your thousands of publisher partners. How do you guys think about content distribution?
I say content. I think distribution comes and context is something you can get wrong. But without content, like fast forward 10 years, half the booths in this place won't exist.
All right, man.
There are a lot of companies here that are pretty traditional images, companies that manage images in boxes and corners. But the companies that clearly represent the future are the ones that are built on top of content. With the concept of, again, back to just like getting somebody to actually read your message or actually derive value from a page view. The way to derive value from a page view is introducing something new to somebody that they didn't know before they arrived at that page, or maybe reinforcing a concept that they already knew but weren't thinking about. You were talking about the BMW 7 demo outside, or somebody was. The BMW 7, somebody was talking about it before, has new gestures. There's like a gesture-based interface. If you went to a page and saw a banner in the corner with like a nice little BMW and some hands waving, maybe you get some new concept that BMW has something to do with touchless. If you see a headline on Buzzfeed that's like a promoted story from BMW, the 3 coolest things you can do with the new touchless BMW driving interface, clearly that's going to stick in your head in a way that's much more profound than just seeing a picture. And so, again, context and distribution are important. Without content, I don't think we're going to have an ad industry.
I like that. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly always talk about the fact that if you're talking about brands rather than actual publishers who are publishing content, then all 3 of those things are absolutely crucial, but you can't do one exclusively or overpower with one. So if, for example, you can build this amazing content experience and you're getting content from partners, from your own employees, from wherever it is that content is actually coming from, and you don't think about the distribution and actually pay to also have people coming to actually read your content or do some kind of native placement or have an actual site built with a publisher, then you're absolutely going to be teeing up for failure. And I think that the content side of things is absolutely hugely crucial to get right at scale. It's very difficult, and what you can't do is just think that I'm a brand that sells cars, I'm also easily just going to be a publisher. I mean, there's a reason why publishers are huge, big organizations with a lot of people working in them. It's difficult to publish content at scale. And I think that, some people don't think about that sometimes when they're going into these content marketing initiatives.
And then Stan, I'd love to.
Yeah, and as a traditional content publisher, as the core of the business, definitely is context and distribution key. And how do you train that muscle? That's probably it was already baked into the print system. But for me, content will become even more important, and we kind of we look at the Buzzfeed model, and we look at our multicultural model, and we see that still language and taste is a huge barrier to success. So all these things, you get your context, you get your distribution, and the content play will get in so many ways, so local that it becomes hard to scale that business. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing is how do you get that right special sauce from language to language? I haven't seen any content play come over from the US and be successful in Western Europe. Not one. They get to the UK, and the minute they cross the sea, they all bomb. And so
Tell us some examples.
Yeah, I
of
want to
those.
hear some examples.
Yeah. What one's done well? Tell me one. So one U.S. company
failed
that's a
ones.
content play that's done well overseas in continental Europe, and it's because they don't get that right secret content sauce. They haven't.
I think that BuzzFeed's doing it all right.
Yeah, that was going to be the cut.
But I mean, I think that we've learned a lot in our international efforts. I think that we now have a lot of significant local staff in continental Europe. Obviously, we have a big, we have a big office in the UK, but we also have people working locally in Paris and Berlin, and soon Madrid. We already have a Spanish site that is fairly successful, such that we think that it's worth it to invest to have a local team. But you're right in that you need to have a local team because every culture is different. Even within a country like France, they have many different kinds of cultures, and so we have to have a diverse staff, and you need lots of people to make up that staff in order to really hit the stride.
So Dan did an interesting thing in his answer. He used a BuzzFeed-esque headline, and it rolled off the tip of your tongue.
I'm pretty good at the headline writing.
It was very attention-grabbing. So I'm interested. Do the headlines transfer?
I think that the list format is attractive in a lot of different cultures because it is a very clear and obvious thing of what you're going to expect. If we have a post that's titled 24 pictures of cats and babies that will brighten your day, you know that you will see a list of 24 pictures of cats and babies who will brighten your day, right? I mean, it's very obvious. And so I think that giving readers great content, not tricking them into clicking your story, just this is what it is, I think that's a good practice.
But also, I think that the key thing
place.
with it as well is that, it was something that was on the screen there a second ago, but it's really shareable content.
Right.
And so, as we, all these stats and research reports that come out, and more consumption of content is on the mobile device, it needs to be something that is really easy to look at on a mobile device. And if you talking about, a great big long article, something that's quite heavy, maybe that's not as easy to consume as something that's short, snappy, entertaining, or whatever you want to call it. And again, this is one thing that also ties back into why content is so important, is that banner ads don't work on mobile devices. Content does.
Right.
And so it's one of the reasons why content is so crucial to brands and publishers to serve their brands through content rather than through solely just banners. And clearly banners are still going to always have their place, but as mobile just gets more and more popular, content is going to be becoming more and more important.
No
Can I
dissent
just,
from me
like-
there.
But how does your organization react to it?
Yeah.
And how do they adjust to that reality now that their medium is changing?
Yeah, that's always the question of transformation.
Right.
I think the pain is that we invested tons in one building in two countries, the biggest mobile networks. So we had Mob Value in France, and we had then G&J, AMS with these huge third-party networks. And we tried to do the same thing that we did in desktop. And we're okay, but we didn't really understand for a long time what the user was. And this transformation is done to basically one of the toughest things to go. You're going to have a different package to actually retain usage and give the better brand message. And that's why we've bought companies that actually do great semantic content recommendation, like Ligatos and Bizeo, why we work with these two guys, or will work with them, because they definitely add value and help us transform ourselves a little better.
Should we get the deal going right here? Dan's ready. So
I've got a question for Mr. Sugarman.
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
Fast forward to the world where you guys don't have banners on mobile. I think we all nod our heads. Banners on mobile don't work. But in reality, then the immediate next sentence out of our mouths is, but it's okay, you still have them today. Fast forward to that world where you don't have banners.
Yeah.
How far out are we on mobile? You can keep them on desktop.
I think that you're the IAB guy here. I think these typical IAB banners will vanish probably within the next 18 months. So, you remember, it's Germany and France were slower. You probably would answer
18
that like
months
6
sounds
months.
good to me.
yeah.
But,
happy.
but it's going to happen pretty quick just because it's just not as effective as other things. They're going to stay on desktop for a long time.
Yeah, I guess they'll exist too on social games and the calculator apps and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I forget what thread we're on, but just as I think about that, the power of native ads that fit in naturally, like the Buzzfeed model, is that it brings back the unique selling proposition of a publisher. Like the calculator app that I use on my phone can sell the exact same banner inventory that Gruner and Jahr can, that the New York Times can. And if it's audience targeted, the value of an impression for me being targeted on a calculator app and on the New York Times are almost exactly the same for a traditional banner. Versus if it's a story and I'm trying to talk about promoting my Buzzfeed story about the 3 best uses of the new BMW car, that makes no sense on the calculator app. It makes no sense in Clash of Clans and Candy Crush. It makes a ton of sense and creates a ton of value inside of a truly editorial stream. And so I think it's not just about banners don't work. I think it's actually the first version of RTV and the first version of programmatic and the first version of just IAB standards took out all the mojo from advertising from publishers. It made it so that an ad was just a space, a corner of a page. And I think you bring back a lot of the mojo. I was telling somebody earlier, it's like telling restaurants you have to use the same ingredients across every restaurant in the world, but how you assemble them is up to you. You have to use the exact same ingredients. I think it's like what Google and the programmatic world has done. Yeah, there is a TV show about that. And the food's never that interesting, is it? I think it brings back like the flavor and it brings back the mojo, for lack of a better word, to publishers.
And I think that's totally right. And I just wanted to respond to something that you mentioned about what kind of content that is really shareable. I think that there is a myth out there that the only content that's shareable is short. I think that obviously entertaining content is shareable, but I think that what we have found is that people spend a significant amount of time even on content that is entertainment, that can be in a list form, and that content that is that has more words in it actually has a higher share rate than content that is what we call in the valley of death, which is like in the medium form, and then content shares pretty well in the short version as well. But the content, the bucket that shares the best is actually like content that has a lot of words in it also. So and that people spend a lot of time on. So I think that it's a myth that especially for BuzzFeed content, that the only content that does well is short.
Yeah.
It's definitely
And
not
that's
true.
good for us
And it's good for
we
publishers.
know long-form content.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's good for, and I think that it's good for publishers, also good for brands, because then brands know that they can write and edit well a message that will get their brand across, that will get their point across.
So that's actually a perfect segue into the content marketing budgets, and kind of in this world where software companies touch publishers, publishers are software companies. We could talk about your very interesting set of responsibilities as a publisher. As you guys compete for budgets, what have you seen becomes the commodity? And you talked about this specifically, calculator versus New York Times serving a banner ad. But what's become the commodity in the publisher's offering, and what's become a differentiator? And I'll take the broadest definition of a publisher, including the brands who you work with and the brands who you help to distribute their content marketing.
So I would say this: commodities become a bad word in ad tech.
Yeah.
Because commodity means that it is the same value that you're selling. But commodity as a concept's not bad. Commodities can be traded. Without a standardized commodity that can be traded, everyone's trading with different currencies and different expectations and different buy-in models and selling models and ROI models. And so I think commoditizing is not the word, standardizing the component parts necessary to serve ads that fit in naturally on all these sites. They're going to look different to the users. They're going to act different to the users. They're going to function different depending on the site. But if the form factor can be standardized, as it has been standardized, that's actually a good thing. The standardization of the component parts necessary to serve a modern ad is actually the way you create a commodity that can be traded programmatically. It can be traded in a consistent way. You know, a media planner, despite Buzzfeed being sometimes the core, most important part of their media strategy, isn't just buying Buzzfeed. They're buying Buzzfeed and AOL and Yahoo and New York Times and Time Inc. and Gruner and et cetera. And so I think if you can standardize it so that that media plan, that media strategy fits pretty naturally across all the sites, you'll be able to increase the budgets much larger than hoping just for custom integrations on every single individual publisher.
But just to dive on that a little bit more, that's for the end user. What about when you get into the actual pitch, into the notion of, right, you have content marketing studios, you have a ton of publishers who have built these at a loss or with no view.
Well, not a loss.
Yeah.
But I mean, content marketing is $100 million plus business in Europe for us. And the thing is, I can totally agree with Dan. How do you get these standardization in that business to look individual but still scale?
Right.
The fact of the matter is, and every publisher gets this, give me something I've never seen before, right? So I don't want to say, I've never seen before, please put it in the pitch, and I want this sales uplift and this other uplift. So that makes it really tough because things that work well on a standard, you have to basically throw those away and always try to recreate and innovate things that might not work. So I'm a big fan of, yeah, the cherry on the cake's nice, but you have to be able to standardize and scale other things.
Yeah, I think it's you've never seen this content idea before. You've never seen this type of content before. You've never seen this way of spinning the story of the BMW touchless car before. But the distribution of it, that's what you're always buying from us. And that's ideally the same kind of thing you buy across all your different publishers, maybe with slightly different pricing models, but with generally the same conceptual way of serving it.
But I do want to, as you were in this liminal state, how did you build your sales or your content marketing organization to deal with this reality?
Well, the reality is that you have different sales motions.
Right.
And that the sales motion for a very individual is basically the creative agency meets a publisher, which is a very tough sales motion.
Right.
And it has to be built basically on the top or on the side of the organization. The normal organizations, sales organizations are good for selling standard products. They're also highly profitable by doing that.
Right.
So
the commodity.
Yeah. So by you're taking a lower margin business, the business guy here, sorry, and mixing it with a higher margin business. And I don't think that's a long transformation to do this. Right. So that's why we've set up different sales units and then try to get them to work together. But this special creation individual, these done by their special units.
Interesting, Mark. The first question to you, you quickly corrected to make sure it was clear that Newscred is a software platform and not a consultative sales unit. How do you guys look at building your sales teams?
Well, I mean, actually, what I wanted to do was address the question that you'd asked before a little bit, which is around budgets and that side of things. And I think one of the things that's interesting to flag up is that we certainly don't see content marketing as a campaign-based initiative. And the whole agency world and a lot of marketers have this very much campaign mentality around, I'm going to do something, I'm going to create this amazing thing, and then 3 months later, I'm going to do something else. And that doesn't work for content marketing. And so it's a much longer sort of cycle, if you will. But the ultimate rewards are much greater, because what you're doing is you're building a relationship with an actual consumer of your product or potential consumer over a long period of time, building emotional connection, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is that from a budget perspective, there's an entire industry that's built around, no, we have budgets for campaigns. And so that's the sort of one of the challenges that we see, certainly, when we're actually talking to brands around what it is that we do, is getting people to move away from that campaign mentality. And so then it's like, okay, well, where does the budget then come from to actually pay for this always-on sort of approach? And that's, the sort of interesting dynamic.
Usually, Mark, that's from a different, we talked about this. This is from marketing communications. So the brand, we can talk about, they're campaign-oriented, and marketing communications usually goes, well, I have DNA and I have a brand vision for my company, and I have to communicate that for a long term. Mm-hmm. So when we service Lufthansa or the German train station or Volkswagen or whoever, then you're definitely setting up newsrooms and you're definitely talking to the corporate communications people and not just the brand people.
Yep.
So now I'm interested.
Well, at BuzzFeed, it's kind of funny. I kind of think of BuzzFeed as content marketing. Like, what do editors do? They're basically writing content, and then they are marketing it out to their Twitter feed and their Facebook friends, and we provide tools for them to do that, to optimize on every platform, and to understand how those pieces of content are successful or not on their marketing campaigns. And what's great is that our creative team, which is basically our our content marketing, what we here are talking about in terms of content marketing, our creative team uses the same tools and uses the same platform as our editorial, and so it's very nicely aligned in terms of the strategy of the company and what everyone works on and what everyone strives for, and so it's not as complicated for us to say, oh, we have this native. This kind of format, and then now we are going to make sponsored content or branded content in the same way.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the term shareable. You've mentioned the term shareable. Our opening question had the term shareable. Yet there's a lot of people who are saying earned media is dead. There's really paid and owned. So what do you think? Is this accurate, or is the death of earned media greatly exaggerated?
I think the death of media is greatly exaggerated for sure.
By the way, apparently people do not read platforms with shareable content. So they may have been dead before it even was born.
BuzzFeed obviously gets a lot of its viewership from what I think is referred to here as shareable platforms. And for brands in particular, what we see is that people who get to sponsored content from a share have a higher brand lift perception than people who don't. Consistently across the board, practically every campaign that is, that we do this kind of survey for, and so not only is earned media real in terms of absolute numbers, it is extremely effective.
Mark, do you see the same?
Yeah, I don't think that the whole PR industry is dead. I think that the difference is that brands don't have to rely on PR, journalists to pick up stuff about them anymore. They have their own methods and means of actually communicating with their audience, be it through social, be it through paid placements in publishers, but that doesn't mean that the PR executive is gone. But certainly, what we see is a lot of morphing of PR and comms and marketing, and PR agencies who are now saying, "Oh, actually, we're doing content marketing now. We're not doing PR." So maybe that's what it is. It's just calling it a slightly different name rather than it is gone.
So I hear the clock ticking. Dan, go for it.
I would actually say, despite the name of our company being Sharethrough, I don't even really care too much about the share, period, let alone the earned media that comes from the share. I think that some publishing businesses obviously require a share to get distribution, but I think if you're trying to think about business models, relying on sharing is always going to be a lost cause. Because out of the whole room here, a small percentage each day share content, like maybe 2%, 5%, 10% share content a day. And for a given article, only 1%, if not less, are going to share that article. Nobody also sees ads, but everybody in this room reads content every day. almost every person in this room reads headlines, skims feed readers, reads Buzzfeed, reads stories every day. And so I think it's really less about the share. I think it's more about getting stories like maybe shared into the streams of publishers through paid media and through earned media, owned media. But getting users to share and all the social share discussion, I think it's actually less important that everyone makes it.
Well,
makes
for
it out
me,
to be.
for BuzzFeed, I mean, just to counter that, I think that for us, what we learn from sharing is that it helps us make better content. It helps us write content that will spread. It helps us understand our users and what they want and why. In fact, like so many sort of like, I wouldn't call them breakthroughs, but just sort of things that we understand, we do it by reading comments. It sounds extremely low tech, but literally like editors, video producers, they will go onto Facebook or what have you, Twitter, and like just read what people are saying about the content that they've made, and that will give them ideas about what to make for next. And I think that for us, people think about BuzzFeed as the end product. It's like, oh, BuzzFeed makes lists and videos. But what BuzzFeed is we're a process. We have a process in the way we think about making content, the way that we think about what our users are doing and why they're doing it and why they're sharing it with their friends or not. And that's why for us the share is important. Obviously, it gives us great distribution, but even more so, it gives us a way to understand who our users are, why they like that content or not.
And so with that, we were just getting into it. The lights have come out.
Cool.
We have to. We're done
Maybe
sharing
you
with
can
all
dance
of you.
us off stage.
Yeah, exactly. We're done sharing with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us. To all the panelists, thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
me.
Thank you.